Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I'm the founder and CEO of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting, LLC. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. On this podcast, I share my experience, strength, and hope from recovery. I don't support or endorse any particular 12-step recovery program, and I don't claim to speak for any 12-step fellowship. My hope is that you will find my words helpful in some way, whether you're in recovery or not. This is episode 115. Here's how to leverage those codependent powers for good. If you're a fan of this podcast and want to support it, please check me out on Patreon. If you're not familiar, Patreon is a platform created by creators for creators that allows them to be supported and rewarded for their work by their fans and followers. You can find me at patreon.com/higherpowercoaching. I'm pretty sure I made up this phrase, which I use with clients and fellows in recovery, and it's this: leverage those codependent powers for good. The idea behind this comes from the fact that some people seem to go out of their way to do negative things, and they could actually hone those powers for good, probably with less effort than they put into the negative things they're doing. What comes to mind to illustrate this is a kid I went to high school with whose name was Steve. Well, it probably still is Steve. I remember thinking, this guy should sell used cars because he could sell snow to people from the Arctic Circle. He was so good at winning people over to his ideas, getting things to go his way. He was relentless, convincing, and the consummate salesperson. But all of his efforts were toward things like getting out of things with teachers or getting others to do things for him, like school assignments. He was extremely talented at this. He was a natural entrepreneur, but it seemed like he was just incapable of honing those powers for good. He acted like his way of doing things was easier than doing the actual work. Perhaps he didn't feel like he had any other choices, which is what I felt like when it came to codependence. I didn't know that I was making choices, but I was. So this situation with Steve really struck me, and it stuck with me obviously, because that was over 40 years ago when I had the experience of witnessing his talents. The idea behind honing those powers for good is the assumption that it's really because of the amount of effort that people are doing things that cause negative outcomes. It's not because they necessarily want to do negative things. That is, they are being kind of lazy rather than trying to do something negative, and the effects of their so-called laziness is the negativity. It's hard to know whether that's true or not. But when it comes to this notion of leveraging your codependent powers for good, my experience is that there's actually less effort involved in honing those powers for good. In fact, it's much less effort. And that is because codependence is a huge drain on energy. If you're constantly worried about what other people think of you, are constantly focused on that which is outside yourself, are always hyper vigilant about who's thinking what of you, what you need to do next, how you can manage your image or manipulate the situation so you'll appear in a favorable light, it's a huge fucking drain on your energy. But if you follow what I'm about to suggest, that drain on your energy will go away. Hear me out. I was a lifelong codependent who's now recovered from my codependent ways. That means I still have codependent tendencies, but I see them, I'm able to check them, and I have people that I can check in on with about them. But when I was first in the process of getting over my codependence, I was able to leverage my codependent powers for good. So here's what I mean by that. As a codependent, my tendency is to want to please other people and to do things for other people, put their needs before mine. One of the ways that I learned to take advantage of that tendency without playing into the dysfunction of codependence was to use someone else for an accountability partner. That means that my desire to not want to let people down will help me if I use an accountability partner. For example, if I commit to an accountability partner, I'm not going to respond to that person's email for the next 24 hours. I'm much more likely to stick to that than if I just told myself I'm not going to reply for 24 hours, because I don't want to displease that other person. I want them to think well of me. I was talking with a client just this week who said that they were following through on their tasks just to please me. Now, these were tasks that the two of us decided together she was going to work on this week to help her in building her boundary system, which is what we do in my coaching programs. And I said, well, right now, it's okay if you're doing it to please me. It benefits your long-term well-being if you do that. Now, if this was 2 years from now and you are still doing it just to please me, that wouldn't be okay. But in the beginning of your journey to learn how to set boundaries, to really live life the way you want to live it, to live on purpose and to follow through and stop abandoning yourself and start putting yourself first, it's okay to leverage those codependent powers for good. What I was saying to her is that it's okay for now to use your desire to please me as leverage to get things done that are for your good. Here's an example of how I used to leverage my codependent powers for good before I was ever in recovery. I used to say, I love to entertain people because that means I'll clean my house. That is, I wouldn't clean my house for my own benefit, but I would definitely clean it for other people. What's interesting about my recovery is that I've stopped abandoning myself in a whole slew of ways, including recovering from codependence and being a much better housekeeper, because I follow through for myself. I take care of myself. I'm still not a great housekeeper, but I'm better than I was. However, I don't let the condition of my house, which is often dusty and needs to be swept, keep me from inviting people over. In the past, I would absolutely not have invited people over if the place wasn't just right, because I cared so much what other people thought of me. Now, I care more what I think of me, and other people liking me is a bonus. And I've learned that people are going to judge me, because that's what people do. We judge things, the world, other people. We are judging, discerning creatures. So I might as well get judged for the actual me than some fake good housekeeping version of me. I have a whole episode on getting over the fear of being judged. It's number 6, if that's something that you struggle with. Anyway, if you're coming to my house, then I hope that you're there to see me, not to inspect my home. So the lesson here is, if you're codependent, try using those codependencies for your own good. As you're working to get over your codependence, use that desire to please others for your benefit and to help you reach your goals, to get over your codependent ways, to learn how to set healthy boundaries. Now, that could mean asking a friend to be your accountability partner. It could mean hiring a coach, such as myself. That's one of the best things I find in working with my coaches, actually. Among other things, they help me hold myself accountable to the goals that I've set for myself. Maybe for you, it's your sponsor, a recovery partner, a step group, a therapist. But I encourage you to think about how you might use that tendency to be other-focused and turn it into something you can leverage for your healthy benefit, rather than as a complete drain on your energy. One last thing before I go. I'm giving away a free 45-minute breakthrough boundaries call to the next 10 people who sign up. You can either DM me on Facebook or Instagram or email me at barb@higherpowercoaching to sign up for one of those 10 calls. It might just be the best way for you to hone those codependent powers for good. That's it for today. If you've been finding this podcast helpful, please consider a donation to ensure I can continue. To choose the level of support that feels right to you, go to patreon.com/higherpowercoaching. Please also review it on Apple Podcasts, like and subscribe to it on your favorite podcast outlet. I'd really appreciate it, and it helps others to find the podcast. Now, if someone in particular came to mind when you listened to this episode, please share it with them. And don't forget, I'm on Instagram at Higher Power Coaching. I run group and private coaching programs on creating healthy boundaries. And if that sounds like something that would interest you, head on over to barbchat.net, where you can get on my calendar for a free 30-minute Better Boundaries consultation. My ideal client is someone who is ripe for change. If that's you, then go to barbchat.net and get on my calendar. My goal with all of my work is to help you make lasting changes in your life, like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. Remember, it's never too late to recover. No one is beyond hope, and healing is possible. Thanks for listening.